You're listening to the Oneofus.net podcast network. I was going to open it with a joke about Linda Lovelace, but right before we start, they're all like, oh, there's stupid people making jokes about Linda Lovelace. Like, we don't know who Deep Throat is. I'm like, fine, I'm that dumb guy. I would have laughed.
Isn't Deep Throat the guy one time Gray Fox called himself a Deep Throat in Metal Gear Solid? I'm the only one who got that part.
That was a deep cut.
We record this, Chris, so if you hadn't told them the joke was ruined, you could have actually started with the joke, but and they wouldn't have known.
I was going to let you have. I was going to go with it.
We would have just, we would have gone with it. He's like, oh, he's using that joke
Monkey would have given me that look. My heart wouldn't have been in it. I would have felt like a fraud. I mean, more so than usual.
Your cat's always
Frank would have given that fake laugh. You know, yeah, there it is.
Like the slow clap. Oh, the Deep Throat.
Wait, so did I watch the wrong movie then?
Well, I would argue yes, but obviously I'm not in the majority here and talking about Mark Felt, the man who brought down the White House, which is, of course, there, in case you don't know who Mark Felt is, which, let's face it, most people don't. Except for people who are really deeply into history from the 60s and 70s.
Poli-sci majors.
Or just old enough to remember some of these things.
Well, see, I remember these things, but I also don't remember the specifics. You know, like my entry point for this, more than anything, was the movie All the President's Men, which is a great movie.
Which is a great movie.
Which never mentions Mark Felt because nobody knew that's who Deep Throat was at the point that movie was made.
Yeah.
I mean, although, I guess casting Hal Holbrook was pretty close. I mean, they're like, he's got white hair. Did they know?
Yeah.
We don't know.
I suspect there was some amount of suspicion, even at the time, among them. And obviously, Bernstein almost certainly knew.
I mean, Mark Felt has been suspected of being Deep Throat from the beginning. He's one of the guys who, on everybody's list, sooner or later, he turns up. Because he's the obvious person. In a way, he's kind of hiding in plain sight. Because as we find out, Mark Felt is described repeatedly as the G-Man's G-Man. A guy who was so loyal to the FBI.
To Hoover.
So loyal to J. Edgar Hoover that everyone assumed that no matter how pissed off he was, he would never do anything that would involve lying to the public or putting the FBI in a bad spot. Yeah, he would never break ranks.
He's the guy who had been doing it for so long, had always, like he keeps saying in this movie, Liam Neeson playing him, I know everything.
Yeah.
I know all the stuff that happened, and he is the last guy you would ever have to worry about opening his mouth. But they're like, okay, so then when Hoover dies and there's a big shakeup in the FBI as a new guy is installed by the White House, a political appointee, and clearly things at the FBI are starting to go south, as Liam Neeson's character of Mark Felt keeps insisting. The FBI doesn't work for anyone else.
Right.
The FBI is the police force for everyone else. The moment we start answering to someone else, we're no longer the FBI. Yeah. He's still, even when it's so obvious it's got to be him in among the ranks, no one can believe it's him.
Yeah, that's what makes it so perfect.
He's just so straight-laced.
Yeah.
Which doesn't make him a terribly interesting character to watch on screen.
I
disagree.
Yeah, me too.
It's an internal character.
Yeah, it's the conflict he was going through. I mean, this was not easy for him to, on a professional level or a personal level. He gave his entire life to this organization, and to see it become this.
It was watching a man who has to have a straight face the entire time, knowing full well what he was doing the entire time. And it was interesting to watch purely because, at any moment, if it was anyone else, they probably would have broke that exact moment every single time.
Well, there's nothing about that guy that was breakable. I mean, this guy, I guess part is I just don't have much sympathy for him either. I'm like, dude, you were the assistant deputy director during the Hoover years, which make the Nixon years look like clean living by comparison.
This is one thing that I think the film gets right, which is, you're right, he's not. And I asked myself that question going in. Are they going to whitewash this guy and make him like just this shining white knight, this, god amongst whistleblowers? And in fact, the film goes to efforts to show that, yes, he does have some dirt on his hands. Yes, he has broken the Constitution, and it even goes to delving with some of the things he did while trying to break into the weather underground.
Yeah, the
countercultural groups at the time, terrorists, and he was willing to play fast and loose with the Constitution if it got results. This is not a man who is like, he's treated as a figure of integrity, but the film never lets us forget that this guy is not innocent. And a very big motivator for him is, it's clear he resents the fact that he's been passed over more than once.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's an element there that's like hard to deny, but I think he sort of had to sacrifice his own integrity in order to protect what he served so long.
Well, let's talk more about what's actually going on in the actual, not story, because it's history, technically.
Well, Liam Neeson has a specific set of skills, because we have to make that joke at some point.
Well, he literally does have a specific set of skills, and most of them involve knowing everything. But what it is that Watergate has happened, and everyone is trying to figure out who did it, not just him, but everyone in the country. And so the idea is that everything's been shaken up since Hoover's died, but now because of that, the FBI is in a weird position where they've installed like a random, the Attorney General into the I think he's the DA Attorney General. He wasn't even the original Attorney General as the new head of the FBI, and now everything's just gone to shit in smaller and smaller ways.
Because they're being ordered to shut down their investigation of something that literally is their job. That is their whole raison d'etre is to investigate shit like Watergate, and they're being told, okay, we're not going to investigate.
This movie is coming out at a weird time.
Yeah, it is, isn't it?
Like, it's very much so.
There's a very, very good reason, I think, and clear reason why this is being released what it is, which this feels almost like it was made less as we'll make some money off this, and more of like a plea to insiders in Washington. You'll probably lose your career, but you'll be remembered forever as one of the most important whistleblowers in history.
Unless you're completely anonymous and then don't reveal yourself until you're almost near death, which is what happened.
The other thing about this movie is that it's not only just about, Mark Felt's struggle against basically the entire U.S. government, it's also kind of about his personal relationships with his wife, as well as
played by Diane Lane.
Yes, played by Diane Lane, and his search, so much to search for his daughter,
played by Micah Monroe, who's sort of a horror staple. She was in It Follows.
Oh, okay, did not know that.
See, this was another issue I had with the movie, because I love Diane Lane. I think she's phenomenal. And I feel she's really given short shrift.
She's given nothing.
Like there's a scene that feels like it should be in this movie because she feels like she should be his rock, or that she is his rock, and she's never really given an opportunity to play that scene.
She turns on him immediately.
You know what's so funny is that they had the press conference, as they do whenever the movie screened, for critics and whatnot. They had a press conference, and everybody, director and stars that were there, Diane Lane wasn't there, but they said they all unanimously praised performance, because they had to cut, I think, a good 60% of her screen time.
Jesus.
Yeah,
which is ridiculous.
From this movie.
She feels like you wonder why she's even here in this movie.
Absolutely.
Because she has no arc. Neither does her whole story. The daughter is just an extension of that ultimately is we all but forget about until they need to do something.
The main issue,
and it's her scenes are the ones that I feel like they're so they come out of nowhere, and they just pick you up and put you in them, and they're like, "Oh, okay." So
those are also,
but they're so good. They are good.
They're good, and they're also the only scenes where Felt really gets to sort of drop, not his act, but sort of just drop his guard.
His shoulders relax.
That's the point, is to show he's not just this guy.
It humanizes
him. It's supposed to humanize him, but there's nowhere. Like I said, it feels crowbarred into me. Yeah. Those sequences.
I mean,
I'm like, okay,
I can't blame you on that,
obviously that's what it's here for, but it has nothing to do with anything. You feel like it might be more relevant because his daughter has gone off to join a hippie commune, which is, for an FBI guy under Hoover, that's the worst thing imaginable. And they're probably members of the Weather Underground who've at least been there.
Right.
And you're like, oh, is this going to play into where it's going to hurt him? Are they going to use it against him? And you're like, nope, it's really just a
I think it's always
episode.
there too, because the director does ask him directly about his daughter. I think there's always been that implication that, hey, You could keep digging, but we could dig up some embarrassing things about you.
Yeah.
And as you realize, all of the guys at the FBI seem to have dirt on one another because of some of their extracurricular programs that would not pass constitutional muster.
Speaking of some of those people, I thought Tom Sizemore was awful in this movie.
Well, he's Tom Sizemore. He's never been the world's greatest actor.
He's as good as he can be.
He weirded me out because I didn't recognize him at first.
I thought he was supposed to be Nixon.
Me
too.
With the
Yes.
distinctive
Oh my
widow's
God.
peak.
Yeah.
And he was so slouched over.
Yeah.
And he actually, because Tom Sizemore's a relatively big guy, and Liam Neeson's even taller.
Yeah, but they played him as like this grease
He's like a
ball
homunculus
guy.
with like this horrible check suit.
And
They
he's
really
like,
want him to look like a rat.
He's like an FBI bagman guy
Yeah.
who like was kind of off in the shadows until Hoover died, and then he comes slinking back like, I want back in.
Yeah, and
He felt almost like a figment of his imagination because he didn't interact with literally anyone else.
He was the demon on his shoulder.
That's so true.
Josh Lucas was the angel on the other shoulder.
He would show up and just taunt him while he was in like alone in a room sometimes. And you're like, where the fuck is this guy coming from half the time?
right, but you also, I think he also serves as a counterbalance to Felt. This is the guy. If he
I feel like it would have made
no
more sense
scruples,
though.
he'd be that
Yeah.
guy.
Yeah, but that would have made more sense if he had more than just like, hey, I'm just here to tell you that you're dumb, and then he runs off.
But he
And
is
I was
also.
like, okay.
They make
Why
a
didn't
point
cut
that
his
he is
scenes?
the.
Yeah.
But they make a point that he is the FBI guy working within the White House.
Yeah,
who has
they
been
do make a
hired
point
by
of
the
that.
White House, and they've hired the sleaziest guy they could find.
No,
And-
gonna
one
play
of the
ball.
weird
And
things
that
about
shows
this
up.
movie is the amount of tiny roles
Yeah.
that have relatively big names in them. Like Michael C. Hall plays John Dean, who is the architect of the Watergate cover-up, who's in it maybe 3 or 4 minutes total. The weirdest,
great,
though, is Eddie Marsan, who has
Yeah.
lately been getting to be a pretty big actor, who shows up for literally 20 seconds.
Yeah.
Who is like a contact from the CIA.
How about Noah Wiley?
Noah Wiley.
Noah Wiley.
Oh my gosh.
Hey, at least he got like this great moment at the very
Yeah.
end with that sort of like, that moment that all of America was going, what?
How about Ike Barinholtz?
Ike Barinholtz was
thought
given
he-
a
yeah.
decent amount to do.
I thought
liked
Bruce
him.
Greenwood was given a decent amount
Bruce
as well.
Greenwood.
Bruce Greenwood
Yeah.
is a
Yeah.
writer
Bruce
for Time
Greenwood.
magazine. Sandy Smith. Yeah.
I thought Noah Wiley actually looked like a young Henry Winkler. It threw me off.
I've always thought that about that guy.
I never
though.
thought of that until I saw him. Now that he's middle aged, I was like, "But you look like the Fonz."
Yeah,
When did that happen?
he's getting puffy.
I guess so.
I don't know.
That's why you notice it, because now you look at actual Henry Winkler now and him now.
Wow, it says,
That's so true.
it says Colm Meaney was a CIA agent, but I'll be damned if I ever saw him in there.
don't
He's
remember
like randomly in the
Colm Meaney.
background of
He
the
probably
sequence.
And
actually.
again, I suspect that there's even. I think most of us like this movie okay, but I suspect there is a better cut somewhere, and
There has to
hopefully
be.
we'll
Yeah.
see it.
Yeah,
I don't know why they cut as much as they did. It's not even 2 hour.
There were whole
movie.
sequences where I'm like, what was the point of that? Like, one of the biggest sequences, I think, is very early on when it shows, Mark Feltz at his home with his wife, and they're just dancing, and I'm like, what was the point of that entire sequence?
Because he loves his wife, Michael.
But then, immediately it cuts to after them announcing that he's not going to be the director. And then she turns on him with on a dime.
this felt like to me like you were watching a season of House of Cards that had been turned into an hour
Right.
and a half.
I mean,
Absolutely.
She
Where
made
you're
it clear
just
that
like-
she had dedicated her life to
Yeah.
get
But it comes out of
that was a
nowhere
great
based
scene.
on the fact that she hasn't really spoken at all up until this point.
And the epilogue outright states that, it's very clear that Mark Felt's wife was troubled. And I think they probably gave a lot more weight to that role in the screenplay
Yeah.
and then left it on the cutting
Yeah,
room
because there's a
floor,
lot
which
of
is unfortunate.
There's a lot of hints to that specific thing, especially in one specific scene where it just outright tells you that she's troubled because of her
Oh, the swimming pool scene.
Yeah, the swimming pool scene where she's talking about how she was an orphan essentially, and that her whole life basically became something when she met him, kind of thing.
Yeah.
And I was like, well, that's a great sequence, but it's one of those things. I'm like,
It feels like
it never comes
a bigger
around.
hole that we
yeah.
never get to
Well, it comes
see
around
the-
later on when they have the scene with the daughter.
But even then, it doesn't feel like it really did. Like Chris said, it feels like a bigger chunk of a story that
But
just never really happened.
I still get, though, why they would say, we've got to cut some time from this thing. It runs in 103 minutes, which, I'm sorry, for me, felt long. I was like, God, there's a lot of stuff that could be cut here, but it shouldn't have been the stuff with the wife. She's fucking Diane Lane.
It keeps
I
it.
guarantee
Those
you
moments
there
keep
was
it from
some-
being dry.
Exactly.
Totally. Yeah.
It's like that. It needed more of his humanity
Yeah.
because I kept going, What is it I'm supposed to like about this guy? I mean, I get that we all go, loyal to your thing, and you're very good at your job, but when your job was working for Hoover, I'm like, yeah, but you're a dick. You know, this is like being like a movie about Dick Cheney, Liam Neeson as Dick Cheney. It's like, well, he was good at his job. Like, no, fuck that guy. But, you know what I mean? Like, we all know that he's going to be deep throat, but at the same time, I'm like, okay,
Which is why I think it's admirable that they don't paint him as a heroic figure. You do see that there are cracks.
flawed.
But that's why you needed
yeah.
more of that humanity side to balance that out, and there wasn't enough of that. There was too many long, dry meetings. There was too many scenes that we felt like, well, we just saw a different version of this exact same scene, especially between him and the new boss, where like I feel like we're cycling through this.
Martin Short.
There needed to be. Yeah.
There's something I have to do praise this movie specifically for is the fact that they just straight up didn't try to get somebody to be Richard Nixon.
Yeah, I did like that they avoided that.
They didn't
so
try to get
glad-
anyone to be the J. Edgar Hoover either.
Yeah, I'm so glad it wasn't Tom Sizemore. The moment he came in, because
I know.
his nose was even bigger, artificially bigger, and I was like, "You're not seriously casting Tom Sizemore as Nixon, are you?" I was like,
Please
"I
don't
think
lose credibility now, please.
It did a lot of good work with a lot of the footage for it, except for one specific sequence to me. But the footage, for all the news reels as well as a few other things, I thought was really well. The only time it was jarring was in the beginning, where it's like, look at all these people outside protesting, and it's just like it's pretending that's a live thing. But if that was on the TV, then I would have been fine with that. But it immediately cuts to like that exact thing happening inside.
Anytime you make any kind of modestly budgeted film set in this era, you're going to end up relying on stock.
Yeah,
I was fine with it, which is why it works so well with the other ones, because it's always on the TV.
Yeah.
So it doesn't have that
little jarring.
issue. Whereas the first time they do it, they don't do that at all.
See, I found it very dark and very underlit, and I think they were going for moody, or either that or the screen we were at was just the bulb wasn't bright enough or something.
I accidentally wore my sunglasses, so I can't say anything.
But it really felt like it could have. And this, I was talking about this with Chris on the way up, having recently seen the new season of Mindhunter, which involves David Fincher. I kept thinking, as much as I like this film, it would be better with someone like David Fincher behind it.
But that's the problem, is that you can only do so much to make it Fincherize it.
No. But the thing is, I don't mean Fincher doing it. I think you could work with that same script. I think what it is that there is a distance that lends itself to a procedural. There's a coldness there. And I think you can actually make this story better by feeling even more distant from him. And just the masterpiece of technique was that Fincher does whenever he's doing a procedural drama. It's dry, dull material investigations, yet he keeps you on tenterhooks, sometimes with just the most static shot.
Fincher wouldn't have done it unless he found a way to go, wait, was there a serial killer active in D.C. at the same time as this was going on? Because I see a way we could tie these stories.
But this is a guy
What kind of
who
score could Trent Reznor do for this?
Yeah, exactly. And Atticus Ross, don't forget about Atticus Ross.
As a man who shares a birthday with Richard Nixon, we all know that there was a serial killer active during that time frame.
Also, you are a crook, so
yeah, you can't prove nothing.
Well,
you don't have any Woodward or Bernstein's following me at all times.
I like the film, but I wanted a more rigid use of technique to make it even more impactful. As it is, it's a good movie, and I enjoyed it for what it was.
So, finish with your final review?
Like I said, I think this is a very solid ensemble cast. I suspect that there is a much better version of this movie that was left on the cutting room floor to bring it in at 2 hours or less, which is unfortunate. I think this is one of the best performances I've seen Liam Neeson give in a while. He's never somebody who disappears into a role, and there's a few moments with what appears to be a dodgy wig that kind of took me out of it. But after a while, I just bought him as Felt. I bought him as an FBI man, and I bought him as a man who, despite his flaws, reaches a point where he can't stay silent anymore, and he has to do something for what he believes are good motives, although some of his less noble motives are mingled in with that. I give this film 6 out of 10 missing minutes of tape.
Mike?
Oh, okay. So, the thing about this movie is that I actually did really enjoy this movie. But there was definitely a better cut somewhere that somebody's hiding in the secret files of J. Edgar Hoover. But the thing,
missing 18 minutes.
It's amazing 18 minutes.
Joke I was
Hollywood
trying.
So
18 minutes, yeah.
the main thing about this movie that I really enjoyed though was that I actually have been very interested in Watergate myself, but I've never really delved too deeply into the story myself. Not because I don't want to, but it's just not something that comes up very often anymore. And so
Well, you don't belong to all those thousands of Facebook "What really happened in Watergate" groups.
exactly, and everyone talks about what's going on with the lizard people right now, and everyone knows that's bullshit. But no, but the actual movie,
Scandals.
Jones, please. Alex.
the movie itself is actually it's a very passable movie. I enjoyed it quite a bit. If you have any interest whatsoever in Watergate and you haven't really looked deeply into Felt's story, it's a good introduction to it in small ways. And everyone who was given a part, I feel like, did what they could with their parts. And Liam Neeson, he did a hell of a job performing for once, because he hasn't done that in quite some time. I would have to give it 8 checkers out of 10.
Frank.
You know, it's funny. When it was revealed that Mark Felt was actually Deep Throat, Nora Ephron, who was married to Carl Bernstein, said, I had been telling people at dinner parties and anybody that would listen to me that Mark Felt was Deep Throat, and nobody ever believed me. And I kept on thinking about that the entire time watching this. I could see how they wouldn't believe you. Because
then Nora Ephron mysteriously dies.
I know, jeez. But yeah, I could see that, and I love that. That's the crux of the whole film, is that this guy that was the most likely was also seen as the least likely, and I think that's just great. And I love seeing his internal conflict, wrestling with that, wrestling and going against this, corporation. It's
the U.S. government.
Machine.
It's a corporation.
It's definitely now.
but he tried to keep it,
Everyone knows corporations are people.
going against what he, spent his life, fighting for and what it had become. And, but I think this movie is compelling from the word go, even though what secrets are going to be spilled, whatnot. There's a sense of thrill to it.
Richard Nixon was the president? Who could have saw that coming?
I know, right? And it also, I love the quieter moments at home, but I do think, like everyone else said, there is a better cut out there. And if this were 1999 and there was that extended cut out there, this would be coming out in December, and this would be like the movie to talk about. As it is now, it's a good October filler, and it is solid all the way through. The performances are great. Liam Neeson, when he does drama, knocks it out of the park every single time. No complaints for this movie, and I think it's a really great vantage point of this particular part in history. Gonna give it 8.5 slices of blueberry pie.
Okay. Look, Liam Neeson is, in my mind, no question, one of the few people of this generation, right now in film, I would genuinely say you're a movie star. People will put their butts in seats to come see you because there's just something compelling about you.
Yeah.
Even when you're fucking sleepwalking through something for a check, we're still like, yeah, but there's always that thing. There's something about Liam Neeson that you like. And this is in the last 10 years, unleashed Liam Neeson part. Ever since Taken, he's pretty much been the guy who plays older, action-y type parts.
Yeah.
And he's expressed that I really want to just start doing drama again. Although his whole promise, this next one was going to be his last action movie, lasted 20 seconds before he signed up for another one. Apparently.
The Commuter, and that actually does look really good. I really want to see it.
But all that being said, and I think everyone in here, they're good. They're fine. But this material, I'm kind of surprised this doesn't have a bigger, resume attached to it of people involved with it. There's a lot of people who show up on direct-to-DVD stuff all the time, or those type of people who show up as character actors in damn near everything on TV or not. And you're like, Liam Neeson's really the only truly, really currently big star in this thing. And even he'll show up for anything for $1, which kind of scared me off right from the get-go. I was like, I have a feeling they were never 100% super confident about this. And I suspect part of that might be that, like I said, I think the reasoning behind this on some producer level might be this is more about hoping that people who are furious with the current presidency will get some amount of like feeling of validation that there's hope in the future,
remember,
or a prayer towards someone to the White House to actually listen and say, remember, this happened before and it was a good thing, and we look back on it as a good thing that there was a whistleblower and we got this douchebag out of office and these people went to jail. Although
That's the
Nixon
hope.
should have totally gone to jail.
But
whatever.
Mark
It
Felt
was never gonna
sold
happen.
these rights in 2005, and if you look at the producer credits, I mean, it was originally bought by Tom Hanks's company. Peter Gruber is a producer on this. Ridley Scott is a producer. There's a ton of executive producers. I think in 2005, this was before anybody even thought Trump would be president. I thought, okay, this is a good, big prestige project, and I think over 10, 15 years, it's just kind of gotten smaller and smaller and smaller until it's now a B-team movie.
And that's why I'm saying I think the only reason it even got made now was because they were like, well, here's our selling point to get the money to get it finally made now. I think this has been sitting around for a long time. Everyone was like, we can't quite find an angle for this to be
I don't know if they could have
a big audience film.
anticipated.
But my main thing when it came down for me is I kept watching it and going, what would make me want to watch this instead of All the President's Men? Which is, of course, the one from the viewpoint of Bob Woodward and Bernstein. And I couldn't think of anything. I still can't think of anything about this that would make me rather watch this than that.
No?
Yeah, but so
It's a better movie.
It's the exact same story.
No,
it's
it's
just
not.
a slightly different person. Yes, it is.
No, it's not.
Same revealing of data along the way, only we're seeing Deep Throat finding it out first. That's all. It's the same story.
It's not about Bob Woodward and Bernstein. It's not about Bernstein and Woodward's internal conflict. This
Also,
is about
poor
Mark
Bernstein
Felt's
didn't
internal
even fucking
What drove him
get
to
an
it?
actor to play him in this movie.
And I'm sorry, we're cutting off Chris. I'm
Yes,
sorry.
you
You're
are.
fine.
Can
Sorry
I
about
have
that.
my opinion, please, Marco?
No.
And my
No.
final thoughts?
You always
Thank
get
you.
your final thought.
I do. I'd be glad to go first sometimes, and I do. But if you specifically request it next time, I will not make me go last.
What?
But I don't care. I just usually do it because it's at least that way I know how to wrap up the episode. But yeah, I just thought this was average. It was slow moving. There were moments, there were highlights. I always enjoy watching Liam Neeson work, but other than that, I just kind of thought it was run of the mill. I give it 5 out of 10 hidden microphones.
You want to know what made this a better movie? It'd make it just an action sequel to All the President's Men starring Liam Neeson instead.
Yeah, where it's like the revenge. All
Exactly.
the President's Men 2, the revenge.
Exactly.
He's
Also,
like,
God,
he's
no
trying
one
to kill
fucking
Nixon.
called out Tom Sizemore for saying 2 words, revenge.
Revenge.
No one fucking called him out.
I know, that was...
I did want Liam Neeson to go, that's 2 words, Bill. That's
Yeah,
one
that's
word.
one
Bill."
word. I was
You
like,
should
he's
have,
like, he's like, yeah, I was making a joke.
I
Never
was
came
just
across as very bright.
No, he didn't.
Exactly. That's why I was like, what is the point of this character?
And I was like, are you sure he's not Nixon? I don't know. Nixon was actually supposed to be pretty smart. Just
was he?
went
Was he
crazy.
really? Until
he wasn't.
Until every single thing in the planet decided to make him the de facto evil president.
well, I think he's the one who made himself the de facto evil president, not everybody else on the planet.
It did help.
Oneofus.net has been your one-stop shop for all things geek for years. But there's a side to them many of you have never heard. The subscription side. Subscribe and listen to great podcasts like The Breakfast Pub, The Original Gentleman, and the Watch a Movie With Us series. Head on over to oneofus.net and don't forget your towel.